Welcome to part 3 of Chevy Equinox head gasket changing. Here I'm doing the rear head. We're doing a little final cleanup on the manifold. Then I'm going to start setting set the gasket, and I'm going to start setting studs with a little bit of anti-seize to make them be removable down the future. Steel and aluminum tends to do bad stuff, so it's always better just to anti-seize everything. And then the studs get torqued down to 18 foot-pounds. I put the heat shield on, just got those good and tight. Isn't really not. I probably could have torqued them, but it's not a big deal. And then I put a little anti-seize on the studs, getting them ready for the next step. I'm doing a little cleanup. I'll set the gasket down and set the head in place, lining it up with the exhaust outlet. Dropping in all the head bolts, and then I'll go around get them all snugged up and go through my pattern. It's always very important to swap out the bolts when doing these newer Chevy motors, because the bolts are torqued to yield. They one-time use, so they're set up for 44 foot-pounds and then a 90-degree turn on top of that. Alright, so now we're setting up the forward head. Pretty much same process. New stud for the one that was broke off when I had it all apart. Again, just snugging everything down, and then we'll get the heat shield put on, so that way I don't have to do it wrestle it while it's in the engine bay.
Okay, so we're just doing a little final surface prep, getting any kind of grease or anything else off the face here. This is kind of your last chance to get anything out of the cylinders before you close them all up. Alright, so in your alignment dowels, drop into the block. It's one of those very important things to make sure you put back in. Because if those aren't in, then your head can walk around and cause you all kinds of difficulty. Alright, we're going to drop these in here. I have no idea which way is up. I'm just hoping for the best. Because normally they're marked. Just happen to not be marked on this set. Alright, let's drop this head in wherever I set it. And we're on. Alright. Long head bolts go in the top holes, short head bolts go in the lower holes. And before I get this head all the way locked down, I'm going to make sure I can get the dipstick back in place, because that would really suck to lock it down and then just pull it back apart again. So, find that dipstick. we're good. Let's see. Okay, so that's, I like to do an extra torquing step in there just to kind of snug everything in position before I do the final torque. A lot of makers will do like a 3-stage torque step. This is actually supposed to just be a 2-stage where you do 44 pounds and then another additional 90 degrees. I did 22 pounds, then I'm going to do the 44 and then the 90. So that gives you, gives it, like I said, it just gives it a chance to make sure everything's seated before you're committed. And then there's actually a torque sequence. I went and looked it up. I got a little cheat sheet right here. Make sure I do everything in order. That's pretty much going diagonal and working your way out. There's that one. Come on. There we are, 44. Okay. Oh, that long extension's not going to work. Just a little too much give in it. There's 90. 90. That's not going to work. Shut that one up. I don't like that at all. I could always put a thing to bite my hand. Okay. So we do with this. Oh. 90. All right. Get rid of that stupid finger biter. All right. So there we go.
So this is something a little unique about this engine. The intake gasket actually straddles around the push rods. And so I thought I'd set the intake down and then just drop the push rods in when I drop the rocker assembly. Turns out that was a bad plan. It is very difficult to line up on the lifter down in the valley. I got two of them on the backside in place before I dropped the third one into the engine and was unable to fish it out. So that resulted in me having to pull the intake back off. But just in case I had an issue, I opted to not torque the intake all the way down, which was a very good decision at the time. Also is helpful to pull the edge bolts out and then pull the middle bolts out on this intake, because the way it interfaces with the gasket makes it a lot easier to get the side bolts out if the middle ones are still in place. And here I am just setting all the rockers in and giving them just a preliminary snug so nothing moves around on me. One thing to kind of be mindful of, there's a little pipe that goes on the right by the thermostat. You can't get the pipe in with the intake all the way in place. So make sure your O-ring's good, and then set it in, engage it into the intake, then line it up on the stud, and then lock the intake down into its final resting position. It's just, like I said, it's not possible to do it the other way around. And do not forget the silicone in the corners of the valley. It will cause you a leak if you don't put it there. Yeah, these rocker studs were like 112 inch-pounds and then an additional 30 degrees. And with my little itty bitty ratchet, it was almost perfect. That about the point I was having trouble adding more force, it was right about the 30-degree mark. It was almost like a hard stop it came up against. So it worked out pretty good. And just going through and make sure I hit every single one of them. And the last thing you would want is one of those to come apart. It would cause all kinds of badness inside the engine. Rockers flailing around and push rods coming out, and it's not that it's not accessible, because once the valve cover's off, you actually do have access to it. It's just the collateral damage would be very high.
Okay.
Now we're back to the time-lapse photography. I'm getting the coolant pipe and fuel line tighten down for that one side of the block. Don't want it to move around at all. And then we're going to torque down the intake. It's a two-stage torque. I don't remember the exact numbers on it, but you just go around zigzagging across the plenum and working from the center on out. I'm starting to get all cleaned up for the valve cover gaskets. And should be, here we go. We're getting the valve cover ready to rock and roll. A little dab of silicone in the corners where the intake and the head meet. Just make sure nothing's going to leak out of that kind of odd shaped spot. I do like this style of valve cover gasket. Is they're molded silicone. They fit into a groove in the valve cover, and then the actual bolts for the valve cover have a metal collar in them so they don't over tighten. And here I am, while everything's still accessible, pulling the spark plugs out and changing it. I covered up the intake just so I wouldn't accidentally drop something down inside, because that would be very, very tragic at this stage of the game. I also left the old spark plugs in just to make sure I didn't want to accidentally damage the new ones, but I also didn't want any debris to fall down through the open hole. So that's why I ended up doing the change out at this stage. I suppose I could have done them earlier or left them open. It wouldn't have been the end of the world. But I just didn't want to take the chance with it. And then, as always, when you're putting new steel plugs in an aluminum head, put a little bit of anti-seize on the threads so they don't you don't run the risk of galling and pulling the threads apart when you change them the next time. Now we're moving on to the crossover pipe. Putting a little bit of anti-seize on all the studs before I start putting it together. And it would help if I paid attention and actually tried putting it in the right way. I didn't realize till I was almost all the way in that it was flipped around 180 degrees, so it only took a second to pull it back out, flip it around the right way, and then get it all torqued down. Got the down pipe all torqued down, so that's ready to rock and roll. And then we're just continuing on as we work our way out from the little down spots. It's a lot easier to get access to all this while the upper intake's off. It just adds that much less bulk and odds and ends in the way. Now that the crossover pipe's in place, I'm taking a moment to check all the hoses, get all the clamps locked down in place so they don't get forgot. And I'm checking that crossover pipe, debating whether to put it in or not because I don't quite remember how it went together. And very important when you're putting on this bracket to put the engine pick point on underneath the bracket. As I got all said and done and realized I had to take it all right back apart again and to put the bracket in. So it was rather inconvenient to do rework like that. So it was okay though. It only took a moment to pull it back off because I hadn't got any further into the thing when I realized that I hadn't installed the bracket yet. And I had kept all the bolts in the bracket while it was sitting in the bins kind of back behind me, which made it a lot easier to try to figure it out. And I still haven't figured it out. Now I just figured out the bracket. So here we go, back apart. It's a lot easier to do the lower bolt and the side bolt before you do the pulley or the tensioner bolt, because the other three pretty well get it all lined up, and then the tensioner just goes right on afterwards. With the bracket in place, I'm starting to install the studs for the coil mount. And it's kind of rough setting the coil mount in place, kind of eyeballing everything. And again, keep forgetting how that pipe went together. I guess I shouldn't have taken so long to pull this thing apart, or leave it apart. And alright, so now we're setting the intake in and trying to figure out where all the bolts went, because I don't quite remember. I ended up, the two corners are where the mounting bolt there's like a weird stud, threaded stud portion. But yeah, the back two corners are where those go. Um, one's for the alternator, the other's for that crossover pipe that I couldn't make up my mind. And also there's a pigtail that runs to the main harness, and that goes underneath the bracket for the alternator, the little black piece that I installed. I didn't realize that till a little later on and had to pull it back apart again. Um, you know, inconvenient. Again, this is why we're doing this now, because it makes it a lot easier to reach everything. I'm gonna actually run all the plug wires before I put the coils in, because you can't see what you're doing, and it's just hard to reach everything on this one. Now dropping the wire harness back in position, and in hindsight, I probably could have left the harness brackets still attached to the harness, because where they unscrew from the coil plate studs, it would have been just fine. And here I'm doing that crossover pipe that I couldn't make up my mind on, just kind of getting it snugged in place, so that way I don't forget how to attach it. And now we're getting the little bracket for the ignition wires on the front of the motor in position and tightening down the dipstick tube. Now I'm fighting with the EGR riser pipe, and unfortunately the insulation is just about shot on this pipe. I left the only remaining pieces down tucked close to the coil wires, so those hopefully won't get fried. And now I'm feeding the plug wires through. The three shortest ones go on the back because they're so close. And then just taking a little bit of time to figure out which one goes where. However, I actually did this firing order all wrong, and I thought wasn't paying attention and thought number one was actually number two, and vice versa, all the way down the line. So when I actually went to start the car, it did not want to start, and it was a royal butthead for better part of the afternoon today. And then I finally looked it up and go, oh, there's my problem. It took 5 minutes to unplug the wires and swap them around to the correct position, and it lit right off. So that was a good, easy fix for my boo-boo. Anyway, so here I am doing the pattern. Like I said, doing it backwards because I was having a special moment today. Getting it all laid in. And I like to lay my wires in where they're, the starting from one end to the other, they lay in there nice and neat. Just makes for a cleaner install. So here we go. We're hooking the battery up finally. And then we're going to clip the plugs on the computer, get them all locked down, set the bracket in. The whole thing just clips in there real nice and neat. Set the air box and the intake pipe. And that's pretty much job done right there. Oil is changed. Now I'm just topping off coolant. Took about a gallon and a half, and then using the little bleeder right by the camera to purge out the remainder of the air in the system.